Hi, everybody, and welcome to Bridging the Gap. It's my great pleasure to host this panel with some old friends and some new friends. I'm Matt Scheckner, the CEO of AW2020, and we miss you in the live environment, but we're thrilled to have you in this environment and be able to have conversations just like this. And this particular topic could not be more timely, and I think we'd be hard-pressed to find a better group to have the conversation with than who we have assembled for you right now. So let's get into it. Jason, I want to start with you.
Okay.
I just reread your book, The Soulful Art of Persuasion, and I want to start with that notion of persuasion. We're now in an era of real polarization, whether you're on the right or the left. That's something we can all agree on. And persuasion used to be grounded in policy and fact. Today, there's let's call it a new subjectivity to facts. Has the game of political persuasion been permanently changed?
Yes, I believe it has. And I think, it's not as new as it feels. I think we've never been more divided. We can agree on that than we are today. But, persuasion really falls into two camps. It's pretty binary. There's either negative persuasion or positive persuasion. And negative persuasion is really what we're seeing in a lot of the political environment today. And it really started in 1964 with the Lyndon Johnson campaign, the famous ad called Daisy, which really had, was against Barry Goldwater. And it was a nuclear bomb went off. It was a girl counting daisies in a field, and a nuclear bomb went off. And it basically was like, vote for me or the other guy's going to kill you. And that was really the first real negative political ad dating back to 64. And today we see it with, Trump really going negative persuasion against, Biden and Harris saying that they're going to cause riots, and then Biden coming back talking about the Proud Boys. And so it's really just escalating, and they're just, slinging mud at each other. And so I think it's never, it's been around for a while, but it's never been worse than it is today.
Fair enough. Yeah, it's certainly louder. All right, Zachary, let's move on. I was watching Jack earlier today talking about DoubleVerify's authentic performance product and how that predictive data drives campaign performance. How do we manage and leverage all the information we have? We have so many different takes on the news. Depending on what you watch, you hear and listen to vastly different vantage points. Is that business of context and how we get the news, how influence creeps into our daily feeds? What are your thoughts on that? It's such a minefield of issues.
Yeah, there's a lot in that question, but to sort of pull from Jason and also historicize this a bit, I think we need to acknowledge that brands and advertisers have always had to make determinations about the type of content they wanted to support, the type of news they wanted to support. That was true for print, that was true for radio, for television, and it's true for the internet. That being said, we're also looking at a difference in sort of degree and scale here. Firstly, the country has never been more polarized. And secondly, the way that people buy and sell ads has completely shifted on the internet. And the scale is something where an advertiser or brand is no longer saying, I want to support publication X, Y, or Z. And they have to be able to get that context and that knowledge about the content that they might be serving on and that protection. And so that's where providers like DoubleVerify or any of the others in the space might be able to provide contextual clues and analysis for the content that you'll be serving on. Now, the content that brands choose to either avoid or to target is up to those brands. But I think that at a very basic level, we see that most of our customers are committed to supporting a healthy information ecosystem. And that's avoiding some of that more extremist or inflammatory content and being able to say, I want to support trusted news publishers and have your advertising dollars go to those trusted news publishers, and also disincentivizing the production of misinformation or disinformation. And while disincentivizing financial incentives isn't a panacea, it definitely is one of the many things that we need to do to improve the information ecosystem and support trusted publications like Politico.
So let's stay with you for a sec, because I think I piled on a little heavy there. What I love about what you're able to do with business is bridge that gap on integrity and context. Are we past the point now where we can bridge that gap on the issue of how we get news and how influence and influencers creep into our daily lives?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, these are questions of technology, but they're also a question of society. And there's no business solution. There's no advertising solution. We need a whole host of solutions that includes improved education, that includes helping out more trusted publishers. And at the end of the day, I think that we see a lot of things moving in a positive direction. And there's a lot more conversation today than there was in 2016. And this problem was around in 2016. So I'm confident that we are moving in the right direction, despite some of the more concerning things that we've been seeing. And it requires everybody to participate. And there might be disagreement on the political issues, but we have certain fundamental commonalities that I think we all have to agree on. And that's the democratic system, that's voting and participating, and that's trusted information and information that everybody can verify. And while there's been a lot of question around alternative facts, I think you also teased that in your question to Jason. We need to be confident that there are certain institutions that are more trustworthy and are the ones that we need to support and the ones we need to listen to.
Well, great. And one of those that we trust, that to me is the very essence of integrity, is Politico. And Ann, thanks so much for being here. I'm a huge fan. You've had a busy few days, I'd imagine.
Indeed. Every day in the Trump era is very busy. A day feels like a week, and a week feels like a year.
Yeah, there was a great line. I think it was Jon Stewart early on where he said, normally the presidency ages the president. In this case, he's aging us. And I thought there was a lot of truth in that. So, and let's talk about integrity. Politico does such a brilliant, brilliant job of rising above the fray and really presenting the stories grounded in fact. You tell it like it is in a very straightforward manner. Is that a lost art now, or do you see a way and a pathway to lower that partisan fray and bridge the gaps that divide us so severely?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at history, right, the concept of newspapers having a perspective or a point of view is not new. I think what Politico has really done well over the last 13 years is say, we're kind of the ESPN of politics. We're not right, we're not left. We really are trying to find out what is happening at the granular level in meetings that you guys can't get into, what's happening behind the scenes in campaigns, and present that information and let people choose. I think the difference has really been the blurring, particularly on cable news in this 24-hour news cycle, and the kind of concept of what is news for cable and then what is kind of opinion, because they don't differentiate themselves maybe by the hours that they're on, but it really has kind of been a blurring of the lines. And I would say kind of to the second point I would make is I also feel like we're really in a choose your own news environment, as both of the two guys have already said. We're in a very polarized situation right now where people are on the right, they're on the left, they're very believe, what they believe very strongly. And so if you are conservative, you're probably getting your news from Fox News. And if you're a liberal, you're probably going to MSNBC, and you could have the same exact news happen and they're going to be presented very differently. And so I think part of it is about, educating consumers, making sure that they're sophisticated. I think part of it is also, I do think we are much more vigilant in this era of fake news in terms of online platforms. You've seen Twitter and others try to step up, maybe not as much as some people want, but certainly much more than they did before in terms of blocking people from posting fake things, or if even the president of the United States potentially tweets something that they believe is against their rules, then they will shut down his account even temporarily.
Jason, let's go back to a point you made that Ann just reminded me of. You talked about this is not new, that it goes back in some form, back to the 60s.
Yeah.
How much of what's happening today is simply a matter of amplification, the amount of news, the immediacy of news, the alerts that we receive, often from 7 or 8 different sources on the same subject. I just got a few minutes ago, a flurry of notes about Eddie Van Halen passing away.
No.
How much of it is what's really happening versus amplification and immediacy?
Yeah. Well, I think when we talk about the 60s and until, the near recent term, there was certainly negative news cycles. There was campaign ads that were untrue, but they were produced and they were sporadic. Now it's sort of the floodgates have opened, and with so many sources and blogs. I mean, you have Kelly Conway's daughter, Claudia, on TikTok, sort of talking about how her mom's lying about Trump's health, and she lied about her COVID tests, and she's filming that live on TikTok. And so is that, I guess you believe her because it's live and you can see through the lies that the, Trump administration is telling. And so I think today it's become, the floodgates have opened, and it's coming from all social platforms, news organizations that are trying to compete with social media. And, it's very hard to know what's right. And basically the bifurcation has come from people supporting their points of view with whatever they can grab. And so there's no, there's no, right or wrong anymore. And I think that's the proliferation of that is what's made it so much more enhanced, although it's always been there.
Well said. So, Zachary, let's go to you at an issue that's at the center of what DoubleVerify does, and that's trust. Trust is a word whose definition has evolved in our industry. I remember years ago going to see one of those old Beatles shows in London in the West End, and the interstitial content was old ads from that period. And there was one ad for a James Bond cologne. And it was basically, if you wear this cologne, you will enjoy the same success that Sean Connery did in attracting beautiful women. There was another ad about Prel shampoo and talked about all the wonderful things that Prel would do for your hair that went way beyond, things that were conventional. It was very kitschy. Trust today in the digital environment means something completely different. Talk about the impact of digital and data on trust and the evolving definition of trust.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, so at a fundamental level, the internet and social media platforms have allowed anybody to become a producer of information. Now, there are still those trusted institutions that I keep going back to, the institutions that are very transparent about their sources of funding, about their processes. And it had also been in the early days of the internet something that government was doing. Government was very transparent and government was trusted. Over the past 4 years, we've seen the trust in government and government institutions continue to be undermined. And, there's sort of a hypothesis that a lot of the conspiracy theories that have become prominent over the past 4 years have been produced in the far corners of the internet and then are amplified by more mainstream media organizations and then get picked up by politicians. However, we're not really certain that that's always the case. And, Berkman Klein Institute at Harvard came out with a study this week that said most conspiracy theories are being pushed out, that are being spread on the internet, are being pushed out from more traditional media and from the administration at this point. So what we are talking about when we're talking about trust is not necessarily just looking at information and saying whether or not it can be trusted. It's looking at the process by which that information was put out, into the transparency of the organizations, and about the way they go about their work and about the language they use. And so something that we do at DoubleVerify is when we're assessing content for, a level of trust, we look at all of these different indicators. We look at whether or not the organization was transparent. We look at whether or not it's information that's been verified by a number of sources, including some of our own interpretation and our evaluation. And we need to combine all those different indicators into, metrics for how we can tell our clients and advertisers about the properties that they may be placing their ads on and the properties that they may be supporting with their ad dollars.
Terrific. Very good. And this is for you, and then Jason, I'd love to get your take on this also. And when you're talking about Politico giving that straight ahead, this is the news, this is what's happening. Consumers and brands are increasingly caught up in a world where we want to see the brands that want to sell to us take a stand on issues that we care about. Democrats and Republicans buy, choose your favorite, whatever product it may be, from baked beans to ketchup to steak sandwiches to anything else. How do brands navigate that increased demand by consumers to take a stand without offending arguably 50% of their customer base?
I mean, this is definitely your field much more than it is necessarily mine in terms of how to navigate that. I would say I've been covering politics for more than 15 years. And one of the things that we've really seen more is kind of activist consumers do kind of the shame game with big brands in terms of what they support legislatively. And as you see more companies, whether it's Black Lives Matter or some of the social protests that have happened in this election cycle, where you've had brands take a much broader stance, I think that's been something interesting to watch. I think another thing that's been, from my perspective, just in the news business in terms of where you see advertisers coming into kind of advertise, I think around the president, in the first kind of months of his presidency, there's a lot of nervousness around having your brand next to a story that would be potentially very volatile with what the president was doing. I think that has really changed. I think brands need to be in front of members of Congress. They have issues that they want to get across, that, kind of things that are central to their core businesses. And so you've really seen, kind of a desensitization in terms of whether or not a brand would potentially advertise in a Politico or a paper that might be, focused on what Trump is doing and some kind of the latest scandal around Stormy Daniels or whatever it might be.
That was great. I actually wanted to take on that. Thank you. Jason, at Mekanism, I
haven't heard about Stormy Daniels in so long. That was a blast from the past.
You're doing a lot of navigating for your clients around those issues. How do you manage from a creative vantage point and a communications vantage point to navigate that gap for your clients?
Well, there's I know you're good friends with the team over at Edelman, and they had a great brand tracking study that came out last year that said something like 53 or 56% of consumers expect brands to stand for social issues at this point in sort of the branding evolution. And I would just say, the advice that we give the brands that we work with is really you don't have to issue hop. You stand for, you might stand for fighting against child poverty, or you're fighting for financial literacy, or whatever is relevant to the brand that you're building or the reason why you started it. That doesn't mean you have to have a voice and you have to talk about Black Lives Matter and boycotting Facebook and LGBTQ issues, and you have to talk about the coronavirus. You really can pick one or two things that are real and authentic to your brand and beat the drum on those and focus on solving those issues. You don't have to tackle the world. And when you try to take on every issue because it's relevant, because it's in the news, and you're trying to ride the wave of pop culture, that's, I think, when you get into trouble as a brand. And it looks like you're just issue hopping versus doing something that's making a fundamental difference.
But that notion of authenticity, that's critical.
Yeah, it's critical. It has to be a reason why your brand exists, something that you can help solve, because you're a financial company, so you want to be about financial literacy for everyone. Or if you're making a CPG making food, you want to help, fill the bowl of every home. Whatever it might be, it should be a product and a problem that you can help solve. It shouldn't be well, everyone's talking about Black Lives Matter right now, so I should come out and have a stance on it. No one needs to hear from you. You don't get that right. Focus on the issue that you can tackle and tackle that and do it well.
And Zachary, as your clients are coming to you and you're giving them, tremendous data-fueled intelligence, are they asking you questions about the pulse on various social issues? Does that come across transom for you?
Yeah, it does. And I think that, historically, DoubleVerify has tried to be an agnostic provider. We will provide you the information that you seek, and it just empowers your own decisions. However, as you may have been able to tell from my comments of late, we have kind of gone away from that only agnostic stance to all content. And we're now, saying that it's very important to support trusted news publishers. I think one of the unfortunate things that we saw during the initial wave of the pandemic, besides, the tragedy that we all are reading about, was that there were a lot of news publishers that suffered because advertisers naturally did not want to be alongside the content about the tragedy. We came out and we, issued a series of blog posts that said that trusted news institutions are important, and you should consider exempting those from any, settings where you're avoiding news about tragedy. And things like news homepages on trusted news publications are actually very high value spaces, and customers don't identify with the content that might be on that homepage. They identify with the news brand. And so we've come out and we've tried to explain that, and we've tried to also have our clients make those determinations when they're comfortable with it.
Great. So just to bring us home, we're in this, incredible COVID-19 era. It has united the world in ways that were unimaginable. I'm trying to think of something else that unites us. The only thing I can think of that's positive are things like, the Olympic Games, things of that nature. As we are all united, seemingly that would be an opportunity to bridge the gap for us. But trust in global institutions, certainly in this country, and relevancy of those institutions has waned. We almost never hear and read about anymore on a daily basis organizations like the WHO that you would think would have risen to the top of the headlines on a daily basis, navigating the global pandemic. Have we blown this opportunity here in America to bridge the gap and unify during the COVID-19 era? Jason, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think we've blown it. I think we, it all comes down to leadership, and our leadership. We're in a nationalistic time period, and that was the person that we elected to office, and that is where we sit. And I think we have blown it. I think it's amazing to see people come together locally and do things during the pandemic to help and to cheer for the healthcare workers. I think that's something that's been unifying. But I think as a country, we have not taken the chance to, on the world stage, form sort of a global fight against the coronavirus to bring the world together. We retrenched, I think.
Zach, your take?
So this is going to either paint me as a pessimist or an optimist, but I don't think that we've blown it. I think that a lot of the divisions that we are seeing over the past several years, and especially some of the communities most impacted by the pandemic, are really just an amplification of pre-existing division and pre-existing, socioeconomic differences. And, hopefully the pandemic has revealed those even more, clearly than we would have seen before. And it's an opportunity that we can, come out of and try and address those and have a better understanding of what we need to do.
Great. And take us home. Your thoughts from the catbird seat at Politico.
Yeah, I think we are clearly in a very divided time. You have an administration that has cast aspersions on foreign countries, particularly on the WHO, trying to say that it's going to cut off funding. Even when you look to just the more granular level of whether or not to wear a mask, there's a lot of misinformation coming out of this administration and a lot of mixed messages. Well, sometimes it should be wearing a mask, sometimes you shouldn't be wearing a mask. And I think that's the one thing that to me has been probably the most disheartening in terms of it's really almost like if you wear a mask, it's your political party that that you're representing. And so I think right now in Washington in particular, it feels very, very divided. I am, we'll see what happens in a little less than 30 days after the election, if the country does find a way to come together or not. Right now, I'm not too optimistic here in the short term.
Right. Well, let's try to end on a positive note if we can. I was talking earlier today, we did a conversation with Donnie Deutsch, who's got a great take on all kinds of things. And he was talking about conversations with his Republican friends, and that when you dig down, there is more that unites us than divides us. And I'd like to believe that's true. When you lay awake at night and you roll your eyes about the day's events, and as you said, and in the Trump administration, every day is a busy day. How do you try to anchor yourself in something that's positive so you can get up and fight the good fight the next day?
I think what we're doing is super important, informing the country, and every day that we need to be there to make sure to hold accountable what people in power are doing, so that everybody who has a vote in this country can exercise that right. I think a lot of people look to the press to right the wrongs of an election that they might not like. And I think the best part about this country is you and everybody else here has the right to vote. And every 2 years, every 4 years, those people are up for office. So do that. If you're unhappy with the way things are, the people that are representing you, you can do that.
Accountability. Zach, closing thought. Something positive, Zach.
I mean, something positive, I guess, would be the work that journalists have been doing. Not to be too deferential, but the work that a lot of journalists have been doing over the past 4 years. I mean, we've seen the importance of the third estate. I think I'm getting that wrong, but we've seen that importance, and I think the work that Anna's been doing, and a lot of her colleagues, I see that she, I think, made some news today. But I'm excited to see what journalism is doing over the next several years and how we can all support that.
Fantastic. And Jason, a soulful conclusion for us.
I mean, just the parting thought is that, hey, I'm just an ad man, and these guys have more impact in the political world than I do, but we do a lot of social good work, and we can use our advertising powers for good and to get out the vote. And that makes me smile at night that we live in a country that's constantly evolving, and we're for the people and by the people. And we just have to make sure people use that right that they have.
Great conclusion. Well, thanks to all of you for joining us here at AW2020. It's been a real pleasure to talk to each of you on bridging the gap. Thank you.